Letter to the listener. Before the story begins, before the voices unfold and the moments come alive in your ears, I need you to pause for a second. This is not just a story. This is a reflection, a mirror, a quiet conversation between your heart and the parts of you don't always speak about. As you listen, you may find yourself in places you didn't expect, in memories you thought you had buried, in emotions you tried to outgrow. And that's okay, because some stories are not meant to entertain you. They are meant to reach you. You will hear laughter. You will feel tension. You may even sit in silence after certain moments, wondering, why does this feel so real? It feels real because it is. Not necessarily in events, but in truth. The truth of love, the truth of choices, the truth of consequences, the truth of becoming. Every character you will encounter carries something deeper than what is seen, just like you do. Some are searching, some are hiding, some are fighting battles no one else can see. And maybe, just maybe, you'll recognize yourself in one of them. If you do, don't run from it, sit with it. Because growth doesn't come from avoiding what we feel, it comes from facing it. This story was not created by accident. It was written with intention, with weight, with purpose. So whether you're listening in the quiet of your room, driving through a long road, or trying to escape your own thoughts for a moment, I want you to know this. You are not just a listener. You are part of this experience. Let the words settle. Let the emotions breathe. Let the story speak to you in ways no one else can. And when it's all over, don't just move on. Take something with you, a lesson, a realization, a shift. Because the best stories don't end when the audio stops. They stay with you. They change you. So as you begin this journey, listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. Joyfully yours, Opemipo T. Oluwole.
Was never meant to be mine. Now I'm standing in the light. No more darkness in my sight. What was lost, I understand. Was all part of your plan. I was lost, but now I see. Now I see. You're writing destiny. Destiny. Broken parts of me. From the beauty I can see. I was gone, but now I'm new. But I'm new. Every step brought me to you. From the ashes I broke through. Now I'm reborn. Unto you. If I had to lose again, just to find where I begin, I would walk through all the rain just to hear you say my name. I'm not who I used to be. I am who you made of me. Every scar, every part brought me closer to your heart. I was lost, but now I'm free. Rewrote my destiny. Every broken piece of me now shine so beautifully. Shine so bright, but now I knew there was only you. Through the fire, I came through. Now I'm reborn. Forward to you. I'm reborn to you.
Chapter 1. The Woman Who Never Died. Death was quiet. That was the first lie Cassandra discovered after she opened her eyes. She remembered the explosion, heat ripping through metal, the scream of alarms, the way Zion's name tore out of her throat before the world folded in on itself. She remembered thinking, at least my children are asleep. She remembered praying in 3 languages she barely spoke anymore. Yoruba from her mother, Korean from her father, English because fear always chose English. Then nothing, until now. Cassandra woke up gasping, lungs burning as if they had never learned air. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, white, smooth, humming softly with recessed lights. Her body jerked upright on instinct, hands flying to her chest. No wounds, no scars, no pain. Her hands were slim, unmarked, the same hands she had at 25. Her reflection stared back at her from a mirrored wall across the room. Smooth skin, full lips, dark almond eyes, long black hair spilling over her shoulders. Exactly the same. No, she whispered. Her voice sounded young, too young. She slid off the bed, knees weak, heart slamming against her ribs as she staggered toward the mirror. She pressed her fingers into her cheek, then her neck, searching for signs of time. Wrinkles, lines, anything, nothing. The last time she had seen this face, she had been married for 7 years, exhausted but happy, holding the weight of a growing oil empire on one shoulder and 3 children on the other. The last time she had seen this face, she had died. A digital clock blinked red on the wall. March 14th, 2046, her breath caught. No, 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 no. She turned, searching the room. A hospital? No, too quiet, too luxurious. The sheets beneath her fingers were silk. The floor was polished marble. A massive window overlooked a city she barely recognized. Riverside had grown teeth. Glass towers pierced the skyline where modest buildings once stood. Roads twisted wider, smarter. Drones hummed faintly in the sky like mechanical birds. 20 years. Her knees buckled and she sank to the floor. My children. The word shattered in her mouth. Eleonora had been barely 6 months old when Cassandra died. Soft-cheeked, always reaching for her hair. The twins Asher and Asha had been 5. Loud, curious, forever asking why. They were grown now, and Zion, her chest ached. Zion Webamliel, her husband, her partner, her anchor. The biracial boy from Riverside with a Trinidadian mother who sang while she cooked and a Caucasian father who taught him discipline and restraint. Zion with his warm brown skin, sharp jaw, and eyes that always softened when he looked at her. He would be 45 now. Older, wiser, maybe broken. Would he even recognize her? A soft chime sounded behind her. Cassandra Webamliel, a calm voice said. You have fully awakened. She turned slowly. A holographic interface hovered midair, glowing blue. Welcome back. Her blood ran cold. Back? From where? A pause, almost respectful. From death. Chapter 2. The name that stopped time. Zion Webamliel had learned how to keep his face still. Grief had taught him. Boardrooms full of men feared his silence more than his anger. At 45, Zion had become a monument. Tailored suits, salt threading his hair, eyes sharp as cut glass. The oil empire he and Cassandra had built from nothing had exploded after her death. New contracts, new fields, new power. The world called him brilliant. Riverside called the Webamliel family untouchable. His children called him dad with careful love. But at night, when the house quieted, Zion still slept on one side of the bed. The door to his private office slid open. Sir, his assistant said, voice tight, there's someone here. Zion didn't look up. Schedule it. She refused to leave. That made him glance up. She gave your security a name, the assistant continued. She said it belongs to her. Zion's jaw tightened. People say many things. She said her name is Cassandra. The world stopped. The pen slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly onto the desk. That's not funny, Zion said softly. No one's laughing, sir. Zion stood slowly. Every movement felt heavy, like his body knew before his mind did. Where is she? The east living room. He walked. Each step felt like walking into a memory he had buried alive. The doors opened, and there she was, standing by the window, sunlight wrapped around her like it had always known her. Same posture, same quiet strength, same face that haunted his dreams. 20 years younger than him, exactly as she had been the morning she died. His breath left him in a broken sound. Cassandra? His voice cracked despite himself. She turned, and when she looked at him, really looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. Zion, she whispered. That was it. That was the sound that shattered 20 years of discipline. He took a step back, heart pounding violently. This isn't real. She crossed the room slowly, afraid to move too fast, afraid he'd disappear. I know what you're thinking. I would think it too. How do you know, he demanded, that I hate being touched when I'm working? She stopped. Because you always flinch. How do you know, his voice shook now, that my mother sings when she's nervous? Because she sang the night we signed our first oil contract. His chest heaved. How do you know, he whispered, what I said to you right before you died? Cassandra swallowed. Her voice trembled. You said, come back to me, Cass. Don't you dare leave me alone with this world. Zion broke. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and gripped her arms, hands shaking, as if she might turn to smoke. You didn't age, he said hoarsely. You didn't change. I did, she replied softly. I lost 20 years with you. Tears slid down his face, tears he hadn't let fall in decades. You're dead. he whispered. I was, she said, and somehow I'm not anymore. From the hallway came a voice, young female, cautious. Dad? Zion froze. Cassandra turned slowly. A woman stood there, tall, elegant, with Zion's eyes and Cassandra's mouth. Eleonora, 20 years old, looking at her like she was staring at a ghost. And behind her, two men, twins, broad-shouldered, identical yet different. Asher and Asha, grown, alive, and staring at the woman who looked exactly like the mother they buried. Eleanor's voice shook. Chapter 3. Mom? The children who buried her. Silence fell like a held breath. Eleonora stood frozen in the doorway, fingers curled into the fabric of her jacket, as if letting go would make her collapse. Her eyes never left Cassandra's face. Not once. Asher was the first to move. No. The word came out sharp, angry, final. No, he repeated, stepping forward, positioning himself slightly in front of his sister. Protective, instinctive. The 5-year-old boy he once was still lived in that motion. This is sick. Cassandra flinched. Don't. Asher's jaw clenched, his chest rising fast. Don't say her name. Don't look like her. Asha said nothing at first. He just stared. His face had gone pale, eyes glassy, like he'd been punched somewhere deep and unseen. Unlike Asher, he didn't move away. He moved closer, slow, careful, like approaching a wild thing. That's her face, Asha murmured. That's Mom's face. Asher, Zion warned softly. No, Asher snapped, rounding on him. You don't get to let this happen, Dad. We watched them lower her into the ground. I watched you break. He turned back to Cassandra, eyes blazing. Who sent you? Is this about money? Because if it is, I know you hated peas, Cassandra said quietly. The room stilled. You used to hide them in your napkin and flush them, she continued, until the plumbing backed up and Zion grounded you for a week. Asher's mouth opened, closed. His breath stuttered. That doesn't mean anything, he said hoarsely. You could have researched us. Asha swallowed hard. She called him Zion, not Dad. Mom was the only one who ever did that. Eleonora finally moved. She took one step forward, then another. Each step looked like it cost her something. Say something, she whispered. Her voice trembled, fragile as glass. Say something only she would know. Cassandra's heart cracked open. You used to stop crying when I hummed, she said, tears spilling freely now. Not lullabies, just humming. You liked it because you said it sounded like I was breathing you safe. Eleonora's knees buckled. Zion caught her just in time. A sob tore out of her, violent and raw, the sound of 20 years of absence collapsing all at once. That's not fair, she cried. That's not fair. I don't even remember her like that. Cassandra moved instinctively, then stopped. She didn't know if she was allowed. Eleonora shoved away from Zion and stumbled forward anyway, fists slamming weakly into Cassandra's chest. You don't get to come back, she screamed. You don't get to look like that when I had to grow up without you. Cassandra didn't defend herself. She let the blows land. I missed your first words, Eleonora sobbed. Your first day of school. Every birthday I lit candles for someone who was dead. I know, Cassandra whispered, voice breaking. I know, baby. The word baby broke something final. Eleonora collapsed against her, sobbing uncontrollably, fingers clutching Cassandra's clothes like she was afraid she'd vanish. Asha stepped forward at last. He reached out, then hesitated. Say it, he said quietly. Say my name the way you used to. Cassandra looked at him, tears blurring her vision. Asha, she said softly. My moon. His breath left him in a sharp gasp. She turned to Asher. And my son. Asher shook his head violently. No, he whispered. No, no, no. His anger crumbled, replaced by something far worse. Hope. And hope terrified him. He dragged a hand down his face, eyes shining. You don't look older, he said brokenly. You don't look like you lived without us. I didn't, Cassandra said. Not by choice. Asher laughed once, short, hysterical. Then his shoulders shook. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands as the sobs came, deep and uncontrollable. I tried to remember your voice, he cried. I tried so hard, and now you're standing here like you never left. Cassandra knelt in front of him, finally daring to touch. She took his hands. I never stopped being your mother, she said, not even when I was gone. Asha reached out then, resting his hand on her shoulder. Solid. Real. Eleonora clung to her side. Zion watched them, tears silent on his cheeks. The family that had survived 20 years of grief stood fractured, but together. And for the first time since Cassandra died, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. The years she didn't carry. The house learned Cassandra again. At first, it was small things. The way she reorganized the kitchen without thinking, moving spices back into the drawer she had always used, shifting plates to lower shelves, as if her hands remembered muscle memory her mind couldn't yet hold. How she folded Zion's shirts the way she always had, precise, deliberate, smoothing imaginary creases that didn't exist anymore. How she sat at the breakfast table every morning, watching the children, grown adults, move around her like she might evaporate if they looked too long. They were careful with her. Too careful. Eleonora placed a mug in front of her one morning. Chamomile with honey, she said gently. You used to drink it when you couldn't sleep. Cassandra smiled. I still do. A pause. Neither of them acknowledged the weight in that sentence. She tried to compress 20 years into days. She learned Eleonora's favorite tea, even though she had once known only bottles and baby food. Memorized Asher's meeting schedule. Asked Asha about his travels, his silences, the faint shadows that lingered in his eyes when he thought no one noticed. She laughed too quickly, touched too gently, apologized too often, and Zion watched, from doorways, from across rooms, from the distance he had learned to survive in. He observed how she hovered near the grandchildren, studying their faces like someone memorizing stars. How she lingered outside the twins' offices before knocking, as if asking permission to re-enter lives she once built from scratch. The first week, he said nothing. The second week, irritation began to show. You don't have to do everything, he said one evening, irritation edging his voice as she rearranged files in his home office. She looked up, startled, a folder in her hands. I want to, she replied softly. I missed so much. He closed the laptop harder than necessary. The sharp snap echoed in the room. You didn't miss it, Cass. You weren't here. The words landed heavy. She stilled. I know. No, he said, standing now. His jaw tightened the way it used to before negotiations. You don't, because knowing means understanding what it costs to keep going when the world buries your wife and hands you 3 children who need you to stay standing. Her chest tightened, air thinning in her lungs. I had to become everything, he continued, voice rising. Mother, father, grief counselor, CEO, protector. I buried my wife in the morning and negotiated oil contracts by nightfall. The image sliced through her. Zion alone. Zion shattered. Zion pretending to function. Tears burned her eyes. Zion. You want to step back in like time paused, he snapped. It didn't. Silence roared between them. The house, which had been slowly relearning her presence, felt like it recoiled. I wasn't there by choice, she said, barely audible. And I didn't choose to do it alone, he shot back. That landed differently. Less anger, more exhaustion. Her hands trembled as she placed the folder down. What do you want from me? She asked. He laughed once, not amused. That's the problem. I don't know. They stood there, 2 people who had loved fiercely, who had built something from nothing, now strangers stitched together by memory and obligation. You died, he said quietly now. I held your body, Cass. I identified you. I buried you. Her breath hitched. I visited that grave every Sunday for 10 years. She closed her eyes. Do you know what that does to a man? To stand in front of cold stone and talk to it like it might answer? I'm here now, she whispered. Yes, he said. And I don't know what to do with that. That was the truth beneath everything. He didn't know how to grieve a miracle. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed again. The mattress felt too wide, too aware. Cassandra lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, steady, controlled, practiced. This was the rhythm of a man who had trained himself not to unravel. She turned slightly. Zion? Silence. Then, what? I don't expect you to pretend. He didn't answer. I don't expect you to forget the years I didn't carry. That made him shift. I can't undo what you endured, she continued, but I can stand beside you now. He exhaled slowly. You don't know the version of me that survived you. Then let me meet him. Another long silence. You're still 25, he said finally. You look at me like I'm the same man who kissed you goodbye that morning. I'm not. I know you're not, she said softly. And I'm not the same woman either. He turned then, finally facing her in the dim light. You didn't age. I did, she replied, just not in ways you can see. His eyes searched hers, as if trying to locate proof of that. You missed the tantrums, he said quietly, the first heartbreaks, the boardroom betrayals, the nights Asher wouldn't speak, the way Asha started carrying his anger like armor. Eleonora asking me why God needed you more than we did. Her tears slipped silently now. I learned how to answer questions I didn't believe, he continued. I learned how to cook, to braid hair, to sit in silence when there were no answers. She reached toward him but stopped midway, unsure if she had the right. I'm proud of you, she said, for surviving. He swallowed. I didn't survive, he replied. I adapted. That word felt heavier than grief. After a moment, he reached across the space between them, not fully closing it, but resting his hand near hers. Not touching. Not yet. I don't hate you, he said quietly. I just don't know how to fit you into the man I had to become. Her voice trembled. Then we build again. A long pause. We don't rebuild what we had, she added. We build what we are now. He studied her face in the dark, older in experience, younger in appearance, both familiar and foreign. Slowly, he said. Yes, she agreed, slowly. Outside, the estate lights dimmed one by one. Inside, the distance between them remained, but it was no longer a canyon, just space. And space, she knew, could be crossed. Eventually. Chapter 5. The weight of staying days passed. Some were gentle, some were unbearable. The house had grown used to silence long before Cassandra's return. Now it held a different kind, one that pressed against the walls and lingered in corners like unsaid words. The air itself felt cautious, as if the estate were learning her all over again. Zion would reach for her absent-mindedly in the morning, his hand crossing the sheets out of habit, then stop midway, fingers curling back into his palm, as if remembering she did not belong to the man he had become. Cassandra would pretend not to notice. She would lie still, eyes open, loving him quietly. Loving the version of her husband forged by pain she never carried. Loving the new lines etched around his mouth. The silver threading through his hair. The strength in him that looked less like fire and more like steel. He had hardened, and she did not know how to soften him without breaking him. One afternoon, searching for something to occupy her restless heart, she found an old photo album tucked away in the study. It had been placed behind legal binders and financial reports, as if memory had been filed away with quarterly earnings. She sat on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, turning pages slowly. Renuka Wabamliel smiled from the photographs. Zion's mother, whom Cassandra had always affectionately called Mama Webam, radiant even through scarves wrapped gently around her head. In one picture, she held baby Eleonora close, her frail arms protective and proud. In another, she stood in the estate garden, thin but defiant, one hand lifted as if blessing the air itself. Cassandra's voice trembled in the quiet room. Is she sick? I haven't seen Mama Webam or Papa Webam. I haven't seen my mother or father either. I've missed them. Her fingers traced Renuka's smiling face. She asked for you, Zion said quietly from the doorway. Cassandra startled and looked up, her heart sinking. Mama Webam? He nodded once. His expression was carefully composed, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. Every time it got bad. Her throat tightened. I didn't know. She believed in miracles, he said, stepping further into the room. Not the kind that came. The bitterness in his voice was restrained, but heavy. Cassandra instinctively lifted her hand toward him, then hesitated. She did not know if she was allowed to comfort grief she had not witnessed. I lost her, Zion continued. 10 years ago, Alzheimer's and cancer. His voice grew quieter. She forgot my name before she forgot her pain, and I had no one to collapse into. The admission settled between them, raw and unpolished. I would have been there, Cassandra whispered. That's the problem, he said, pain sharpening his tone. You weren't. The words were not cruel. They were true. Something inside her fractured. I wake up every day knowing my parents buried me, she said, tears spilling freely now. My mother, Jumoki, couldn't even say your name without crying. You used to call her Mrs. Kim, Mama. Her voice trembled. My father, Hayun Kim, Papa. He kept telling her I would return. He believed in reincarnation. She hated him for it. Zion's expression shifted just slightly. They moved back to Seoul, he said quietly. Staying here hurt too much. Your father still believes in rebirth. He told me once that your story wasn't finished. Cassandra stared at him in disbelief. He still believes that? He never stopped. Zion exhaled slowly, jaw tightening as if bracing against something invisible. You think grief waited for you? He asked. It didn't. She rose to her feet, trembling but steady. Then teach me how to carry what you carried. For the first time since she had returned, Zion did not look angry. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired sleep could cure, the kind that settles into bone after years of endurance. You don't learn it, he said finally. You survive it. Silence filled the study. You survive because the children are watching, he continued. Because the board is watching. Because the world doesn't pause for a man who loses everything. I am not the world, she said softly. His eyes flickered at the word. Wife. It felt both foreign and painfully familiar. You are, he admitted, but you are also a ghost I buried. Her breath caught in her chest. I mourned you, he said. I stood at your memorial. I held our children while they cried for a mother who wasn't coming back. I learned how to answer questions I didn't understand. I learned how to cook the meals you used to make. A faint, broken smile touched his lips. I learned how to braid Eleonora's hair. Cassandra's lips trembled. She used to cry, he added softly, because I pulled too tight. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her. I kept the house running, Zion said, kept the company alive, kept your memory sacred, and now you're here. His voice faltered, and I don't know where to put you. The confession was not accusation. It was confusion. She stepped closer, closing the physical distance that mirrored the emotional one. Don't put me anywhere, she said gently. Walk with me. His gaze searched her face, as if looking for cracks. You think it's that simple? No, she admitted, but neither was surviving without me. The room felt smaller now, more intimate, the weight between them tangible. I can't undo what you carried, she said. I can't attend funerals that already happened. I can't sit beside you in hospital rooms that are now empty. Her voice steadied. But I can stay. The word lingered. Stay. Zion swallowed hard. Staying is heavy, he said. I know, she answered. Leaving was heavier. He studied her as though measuring the strength of her promise. You'll see parts of me that aren't gentle, he warned. Grief changed me. I already see them. You'll hear things from the children. Questions, resentments. They grew up without you. I know. And if they're angry, they have the right. He watched her carefully. Why are you fighting so hard? He asked. She did not hesitate. Because I still love you. The simplicity of it disarmed him. I loved you every day I was gone, she continued. In ways I cannot explain, in places I cannot describe. I don't need you to be who you were. I just need you to let me love who you are. His shoulders lowered slightly. The tension in him loosened. You're asking me to trust something I already buried. I'm asking you to let it breathe. The air shifted, not healed, but softer. Zion stepped forward until only inches separated them. This time, he did not hesitate. His hand rested at her waist, solid, deliberate, real. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Neither do I, she whispered. He closed his eyes briefly, as if surrendering to something larger than pride. Then we learn, he said. Her fingers curled into his shirt. Together? She asked. He nodded. Together. It was not forgiveness, not restoration, but it was movement. Outside, late afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long golden shadows across the study floor. The estate once again listened, and this time, it heard them choosing to stay. Forgiveness is not a door. The argument came 2 nights later. It was ugly. Not loud at first, but sharp. The kind that builds slowly, like pressure behind glass. It started over something small. I'm coming to the board meeting tomorrow, Cassandra said casually, standing near the kitchen island while reviewing notes on her tablet. Zion didn't look up from his phone. No? She blinked. No? You don't understand the current structure, he replied evenly. The market isn't what it was 20 years ago. She stiffened. I helped build this company, she said carefully. I sat in those rooms. I negotiated those contracts. That was before, he said. Before. The word hit like a quiet slap. And now? She asked. Now, he said, finally looking at her. It's different. Silence stretched. I'm not fragile, Zion, she continued. You don't need to protect me from boardrooms. His jaw tightened. It's not protection. It's reality. And what is that supposed to mean? It means you don't know the players anymore. You don't know the risks. The economy shifted. The industry changed. So teach me. His laugh was short, humorless. You can't just walk back into this like you were on vacation. Her face paled. I wasn't on vacation. I know that, he snapped. Do you? The air thickened. You died, he said suddenly, harshly. And I survived. The words sliced through the room. There it was, the wound he carried. She stared at him, wounded and quiet, as if something sacred had just been struck. Do you think I rested? She asked softly. He didn't answer. You think death was peace? she whispered. I woke up alone, without you, without them, without my parents, without a body that aged with time. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. I lost 20 years too. He looked at her then, really looked. There was no accusation in her eyes, just grief. I came back to find my children grown, she continued. To find my mother grieving a coffin with no body in it. To find your mother buried. To find your father older. To find you changed. Her breathing grew uneven. I wasn't floating somewhere in comfort, Zion. I was disoriented, confused, a stranger to myself. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. You don't understand what it was like, he said, voice rougher than before. Holding our children while they asked me where you were, watching them cry themselves to sleep. I know I wasn't here. That's not the same as knowing what it cost. She swallowed hard. You had funerals, he continued. You had hospital rooms. You had contracts to sign with swollen eyes. I had to become someone else to survive. He stopped pacing. I became harder, he admitted. Colder, calculated. I stopped expecting miracles. Her chest tightened at that. I know, she said gently. You don't, he shot back, but there was less force in it now. I see it, she corrected softly. I see how you walk into rooms and command them, how you don't hesitate anymore, how you don't bend. He didn't deny it. I had to, he said, and I'm not asking you to undo that. Then what are you asking? She stepped closer, careful, as though approaching something fragile. I'm asking to stand beside you again. His expression shifted, pain flashing across it. You don't just get to step back into a position you left. I didn't leave. You weren't here. The truth hung heavy. She nodded slowly. Then let me earn it. His brows furrowed. Earn it? Yes, she said. Not as a ghost, not as the woman you buried, but as the woman standing in front of you now. Silence. He looked tired again. I became someone you don't know, he admitted quietly, and I don't know how to let you love him. There it was. Not anger, fear. She stepped even closer, her hands trembling slightly. Then let me learn him. He held her gaze. I don't smile the way I used to. I've noticed. I don't trust easily. You shouldn't. I don't believe things will just work out. Neither do I. He frowned slightly, surprised. You think I came back believing everything would be easy? She asked. I came back to a house that moved on without me, to children who built lives without me, to a husband who had to bury me. Her voice softened. I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I'm asking you not to punish me for surviving it. The words lingered between them. He leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. You being here feels like reopening a wound I finally learned to live with. And me not trying would mean letting that wound define us forever. He closed his eyes briefly. Forgiveness isn't a door, Cass, he said. It's not something I open and suddenly everything resets. I don't want reset, she replied. I want forward. He studied her carefully. You think love fixes this? No, she said honestly, but love is why we fight for it. His shoulders lowered slightly. You frustrate me, he muttered. A faint smile touched her lips. I used to. You still do. The tension cracked, just a little. I don't want to compete with the man you had to become, she said. I want to know him. He hesitated. And if you don't like him? She shook her head. I already see him. The strength, the restraint, the way you carry everything without asking for help. That's not someone I reject. Her eyes filled. That's someone I'm proud of. The words disarmed him. He looked away first. You make it sound simple. It's not, she whispered. It's daily. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. She reached for his hand. But it's ours. He didn't pull away. Not this time. Their fingers intertwined. Tentative, uncertain, real. I don't know how to forgive something that changed me, he admitted. You don't have to forgive all at once, she said. Just don't shut the door. He let out a slow breath. I'm still angry sometimes. I know. I still feel like I did it alone. You did. Her agreement startled him, but you don't have to keep doing it alone. The kitchen felt quieter now, not resolved, but softer. He lifted his hand, brushing his thumb across her knuckles almost absent-mindedly. Don't push me too fast, he warned. I won't. Don't expect me to pretend. I won't. He nodded slowly. I'll come to the meeting, she added gently. Not to lead, not to reclaim anything, just to listen. He hesitated. Then, sit beside me, he said. Her breath caught. Okay, it wasn't victory. It wasn't absolution. But it was space. And sometimes healing doesn't arrive like a grand apology or a dramatic embrace. Sometimes it arrives in small permissions, small compromises, small moments where two people decide not to walk away. Forgiveness didn't happen that night. There was no sweeping declaration, no sudden erasure of pain, but something softened. And sometimes that's how healing begins. The woman he loved while waiting for the dead. Veronica Smith was the only person who had known Zion before everything, before oil fields and billionaire evaluations, before Riverside bowed to the name Wabamliale, before grief hardened him into a man who learned how to survive without softness. She knew him as a boy in Greenwich, Connecticut, awkward, brilliant, too serious for his age. The kind of child who carried books thicker than his wrists and spoke in full sentences when everyone else was still fumbling through slang. She remembered his mother's laughter echoing through PTA meetings, his father's quiet authority on soccer sidelines, the small colonial house near the trees where ambition hadn't yet outgrown its walls. Back then, Zion was not intimidating. He was thoughtful, curious, hungry for more, but still gentle. Veronica had been 2 years ahead of him in school, confident, observant, the kind of girl who noticed things other people missed. She noticed how he flinched when teachers underestimated him, how he softened whenever his mother entered a room, how he worked harder than everyone else without making noise about it. She noticed the loneliness in him even before it had a name. They weren't lovers then, just orbiting lives, friends who understood each other without effort. There had been moments, brief, almost invisible, when their paths could have crossed into something more. A lingering look, a conversation that stretched longer than necessary. But life, as it often does, moved them forward before anything could take root. Time separated them the way it separates most young people. Colleges, cities, marriages, continents. Zion left for bigger worlds. Veronica stayed close to home, married a man who loved her deeply, built a life that felt stable and kind. And then life fractured. Cassandra died, and a year later, Veronica's husband did too. 2 different funerals, 2 different states, the same hollow silence afterward. Grief did not introduce them again. It recognized them. After Cassandra's memorial, after the condolences faded and the estate became too quiet to breathe inside, Zion went back to Greenwich, not to escape, to breathe. He rented a small place not far from the old neighborhood. No security detail, no board meetings, no expectations beyond the sunrise and sunset. It was there he saw her again. Veronica. She was stepping out of a cafe when he walked in. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Recognition moved slowly across her face, as if memory had to push through layers of time to reach the present. Zion? He hadn't heard his name said like that in years. Without title, without caution. Veronica. There was no dramatic embrace, no grand reunion. Just 2 people studying the changes grief had carved into the other. You look, she began, then stopped. Older? He offered. Sad, she corrected gently. He didn't deny it. They sat together that afternoon, and something unclenched in him. She didn't ask about the company first. She didn't mention headlines or valuation charts. She asked, "Are you eating?" The question startled him, not because it was profound, because it was human, because no one had asked him that since the world had turned him into something else. They didn't plan to fall in love. It happened the way slow rain happens, barely noticeable until everything is soaked. Coffee that lingered too long. Conversations that drifted into midnight. Walks past houses that had not changed, even though they had. Silences that felt safe instead of heavy. She told him about her husband's final months. The hospital rooms. The quiet rage of watching someone fade. The helplessness of loving someone you cannot save. He told her about standing at Cassandra's memorial, holding children who did not understand permanence, about learning how to say she's gone, without breaking. Neither tried to fix the other. That was the beginning. There were evenings when grief sat between them, like a third presence. They would speak of the dead, not as ghosts, but as people who had shaped them, molded them, remained within them. She loved you, Veronica said once, referring to Cassandra. He nodded. She still does, he answered without thinking. Veronica didn't flinch. I know. That was why he stayed. She never competed with memory. She never tried to erase the woman who came before her. She never asked him to forget. Instead, she asked him what it felt like to carry love and loss in the same body. No one had ever asked him that. With Veronica, he could exhale. He could remove the armor. He could admit he was tired. She saw the boy from Greenwich still inside the man who commanded oil empires. She reminded him that he used to laugh easily, that he once believed in impossible things. And slowly, carefully, they crossed the line between comfort and something deeper. The first time their hands brushed, it was accidental. The second time, it was not. He hesitated. She didn't push. If this is just loneliness, she told him quietly, we should be honest about that. It's not, he said. But part of him wondered, was he loving her? Or was he loving the relief she brought? The quiet, the absence of expectation. The nights he stayed at her house were different. No board calls, no crisis briefings, no children knocking on doors with questions about grief. Just stillness. And in that stillness, he found something dangerous. Peace. When he brought her to Riverside months later, the estate shifted, not loudly, but noticeably. The children were polite, reserved, watching. Veronica did not try to mother them. She did not sit in Cassandra's chair at the dining table. She did not rearrange rooms. She did not overstep. She existed beside Zion, not in front of his past. She understood what it meant to love a widower. She understood what it meant to love someone who was still loving someone else. There were nights he would wake from dreams, Cassandra's voice echoing in the dark, her laughter cutting through memory like light. Veronica would not ask him what he saw. She would simply reach for his hand, ground him. Grief doesn't cancel new love, she told him once. It just makes it more complicated. He looked at her then, searching for resentment. There was none. That frightened him, because it meant she was real, not a distraction, not a temporary refuge, but a woman choosing him, even with his fractures. He never stopped loving Cassandra. That was the truth he carried quietly, and Veronica knew it. Love isn't a competition, she said one evening, standing on the estate balcony overlooking the river. It expands, or it suffocates. You deserve someone whole, he replied. She smiled faintly. No one is whole after loss. For a time, they were steady, not explosive, not dramatic, but steady. She brought warmth back into rooms that had grown too rigid. She reminded him that survival did not have to mean isolation. And he loved her. Not the way he had loved Cassandra, but in a way that felt grown, deliberate, earned. He loved her for not demanding a resurrection, for not asking him to erase the dead in order to choose the living. And then, Cassandra returned. The impossible happened. The dead woman came back, and everything Zion had rebuilt trembled. Because loving Veronica had not been betrayal. It had been survival. But survival becomes complicated when the miracle arrives. Veronica did not scream. She did not accuse. She did not fall apart the way lesser love might have. She looked at him with quiet devastation and said only one thing. I knew this might happen. He stared at her, confused, shaken. You never stopped waiting, she said gently, even when you thought you had. And that was the cruelest truth of all. He had loved her. He had chosen her. He had built something real with her. But somewhere deep inside, in the quietest, most hidden part of his soul, he had still been waiting for the dead. Veronica Smith was the woman who held him while he grieved. The woman who loved him while he rebuilt. The woman who asked for nothing but honesty. The woman who understood that love does not replace, it expands. And sometimes the hardest love to release is the one that saved you while you were drowning. Chapter 8. The Confession. Zion told Cassandra on a Thursday evening. The children weren't home. The house felt too large for the truth it was about to hold. It was one of those quiet evenings where silence did not feel peaceful. It felt like something waiting. The kind of silence that pressed against the walls, lingered in corners, and settled into the spaces between breaths. The chandelier above them glowed softly, casting warm light across the living room. Everything looked beautiful, untouched, perfect. But the air was heavy. Zion stood near the edge of the room, hands resting in his pockets, shoulders tense in a way that betrayed him. He had been pacing earlier, Cassandra had noticed, but now he was still, too still. I loved someone, he said quietly. The words did not echo. They landed. Cassandra didn't flinch. She had felt it before he ever spoke it aloud, some invisible shift, some absence that grief alone could not explain. There had been a distance in him that wasn't just loss. Something layered, something lived. She had felt it in the way he sometimes paused before touching her, in the way his eyes held memories she did not recognize. Who? She asked softly. Her voice was calm, but her fingers curled slightly against her dress, gripping fabric as if it could steady her. Veronica Smith. The name settled between them. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't violent. It carried no menace. Just history. Just truth. Connecticut, Cassandra murmured. Zion nodded slowly. She knew me before you. There was something in his voice when he said it. Not affection, not longing, but acknowledgement. As if he were honoring a chapter he could not deny, even if he wished he could erase it. Cassandra swallowed. Her lips trembled for only a second before she steadied them. Did you love her? Like you loved me? The question was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that demanded honesty. Zion closed his eyes. For a moment, he didn't answer. And in that pause, everything lived. The years without her, the nights he had broken alone, the silence that had shaped him into someone she was still learning. No, he said finally. His voice was firm, certain. But I loved her enough to feel guilty every day. Cassandra inhaled slowly. That hurt more than a lie would have, because guilt meant something real. Guilt meant he had given something he never intended to. Zion opened his eyes and finally looked at her. Really looked at her. And there was no hiding left in his expression. I buried you, he said, his voice rough now. I mourned you. Each word felt like a weight being placed carefully on the table between them. I built a life around your absence. Cassandra's chest tightened. She could see it now, the years she had not lived, the version of him shaped by grief she had never carried. And when I couldn't breathe anymore, he continued, his voice breaking slightly, I let someone hold me. The room went still, not quiet, still, as if even time paused to listen. Cassandra lowered herself slowly onto the couch. Her movements were controlled, deliberate, like if she moved too fast, something inside her would shatter. Her mind was not racing, it was sinking into the realization that life had continued without her in ways she had never imagined. I don't blame you, she said. Zion blinked. That wasn't what he expected. There was no anger in her voice, no accusation, just truth. I blame time, she continued. Her eyes lifted to meet his again, and this time there was pain, deep, aching, honest pain, but not directed at him. And fate, she added. Her voice trembled slightly now. And whatever power thought this was fair. Zion let out a broken laugh. It escaped him before he could stop it. Not because anything was funny, but because it was too much, too complicated, too human. She deserved more than a man still married to a ghost, he said quietly. There was no bitterness in his tone, only regret. Cassandra's gaze softened. And I deserve more than a man punishing himself, she replied. That landed differently. Zion's head dropped slightly, his jaw tightening. Because she was right. He had been punishing himself, not just for loving Veronica, but for surviving Cassandra, for continuing to live in a world where she didn't. Zion shook his head slowly. You came back, he said, almost as if he still didn't fully believe it. There was wonder in his voice, but also fear, because her return didn't erase what had happened. It complicated it, deepened it, forced it into the light. Cassandra stood then, slowly, carefully, as if reclaiming space in a life she was still learning how to stand in. I didn't come back to erase your survival, she said. Her voice was steady now, grounded, certain. She took a step toward him, then another. I came back to live. The words didn't demand anything. They didn't accuse. They didn't rewrite the past. They simply existed. Zion looked at her, really looked this time, not as a memory, not as a ghost, but as a woman standing in front of him, alive, breathing, choosing. And for the first time since she returned, he didn't look torn. He looked undone. Not by guilt, not by confusion, but by the possibility that maybe, just maybe, life was not asking him to choose between who he had been and who he could still become. The silence that followed was different, still heavy, still complicated, but no longer suffocating, because the truth had been spoken. And somehow, they were both still standing. The Chapter 9. Zion's guilt wasn't just about Veronica. It wasn't even something he could explain in a single sentence anymore. It had grown roots, deep, tangled, impossible to separate from the rest of him. It lived in quiet moments, in the way his chest tightened when laughter came too easily, in the way silence sometimes felt like punishment. It was about choosing happiness when Cassandra couldn't. It was about allowing himself to feel warmth again while she had been lowered into cold earth. It was about the unbearable truth that life had continued, and he had followed it. It was about laughter in a house that once echoed with her absence. Laughter that felt foreign at first, unnatural, like something that didn't belong to him anymore. But over time, it came anyway. Soft at first, then fuller, then real. And every time it did, something inside him whispered, "You weren't supposed to heal this quickly." It was about nights where he didn't dream of death. That was the part that disturbed him most. Not the nightmares, but the nights where there were none. The nights where he slept peacefully, without her. Because grief in his mind was supposed to linger, to haunt, to remain. So when it loosened its grip, even slightly, it felt like abandonment, like forgetting, like betrayal. "I loved you both differently," he confessed one night, voice low in the dark. The room held his words gently, as if even the air understood their weight. "And that makes me feel like I betrayed you twice." The confession didn't rush out of him. It slipped slowly, like something he had carried too long and could no longer hold alone. Cassandra turned toward him. There was no sharpness in her movement, no defensiveness, just quiet attention. "You didn't cheat," she said. Her voice was soft, but certain. "You mourned." He swallowed hard. The word mourned felt too clean for what he had lived through. Too simple, because mourning to him had never been passive. It had been survival, raw, messy, unpredictable. "And now that you're here," he said, his voice tightening, "I don't know where to put that love." That was the truth he couldn't escape. He had learned how to love again in her absence. Not instead of her, but beyond her. And now she was here, alive, breathing, real. And all that love didn't disappear. It didn't divide neatly. It didn't rearrange itself into something convenient. It remained, and he didn't know what to do with it. Cassandra didn't hesitate. She reached for his hand. Her touch was warm, grounding, real. She guided it slowly, deliberately, and placed it over her heart. "Here," she said. There was no hesitation in her voice, no uncertainty. Where everything broken already lives, he felt it. The steady rhythm beneath his palm, alive, not imagined, not remembered, alive. And something inside him cracked open, not violently, not painfully, but deeply. Tears slid down his face, quiet, unashamed. He didn't wipe them away, didn't hide them, because for once, he wasn't trying to be strong. "I would have wanted you to survive," she whispered. Her voice softened even more, almost blending into the quiet between them, even if it meant loving someone else. That was the moment. Not dramatic, not loud, but undeniable. Something inside Zion shifted, not erased, not undone, but loosened. Like a grip he had kept on himself finally began to release. That was when he finally forgave himself. Not completely, because healing doesn't happen in a single breath, because guilt doesn't disappear just because it's understood. But enough to feel the weight lift slightly, enough to inhale without resistance, enough to exist without questioning whether he deserved to. But enough to breathe. Chapter 10. Letting the past rest. Veronica called 1 week later. The name lit up his phone while he was in his study, late afternoon sun angling across polished wood and glass. For a long moment, Zion only stared at it. The light stretched across the room in long golden lines, catching dust in the air, settling gently against the quiet. It felt like a pause in time. He had known the call would come. He just hadn't known when. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Cassandra had taken a walk through the gardens, reacquainting herself with trees that had grown taller in her absence. Even that felt symbolic. Life continuing, without waiting. The children were out. There was no noise to hide behind, no distraction to dilute what this conversation would mean. His thumb hovered over the screen. He didn't answer at first, not because he wanted to avoid her, but because he understood that once he did, something would close. Not abruptly, not painfully, but permanently. And some endings deserved a steady voice. The phone stopped ringing. The silence that followed felt louder than the call itself. A minute passed. Then it rang again. This time he answered, Veronica. He kept his tone gentle, not distant, not overly familiar, just honest. There was a breath on the other end, controlled, measured, but present. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up, she said. I wasn't sure either. A faint exhale, almost a laugh, not bitter, not forced, just real. How is she? Veronica asked. He didn't pretend not to know who she meant. She's here, he said simply, alive. Silence followed, not chaotic, not shocked, just full. She's back, he told her. The words still felt unreal, even now, a pause. Then Veronica said softly, I always knew she would be. He closed his eyes. You did? Yes. Her voice carried no weight of resentment, no bitterness, no quiet accusation. Not literally, I'm not mystical, but there was always a part of you that never said goodbye. He absorbed that, let it settle, because she was right. I never wanted to compete with a memory, she continued, and I never felt like I was. You weren't, he said quickly. You weren't a replacement. I know, and she did. That was what made this harder and easier all at once. So am I, he replied. Another silence stretched between them, this one softer, edged with inevitability. She needs you, Veronica said. Yes, and you need her. He didn't argue, because truth didn't require defense. That doesn't mean what we had wasn't real, she added. It was real, he said firmly. It mattered. I know, he swallowed. You mattered. That lingered, hung between them. The line went quiet again. He imagined her standing somewhere familiar. Still, composed, strong. She didn't ask to see Cassandra. She didn't demand explanations. She didn't fight. Instead, she asked, "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard, because happiness for him no longer felt simple. I'm hopeful, he said. That's a beginning. Yes. And are you at peace? She pressed gently. He thought of everything, the nights, the conversations, the rebuilding. I'm trying to be. That's enough. He leaned back slightly. I never meant to hurt you. You didn't, she replied. You loved me the only way you could. And that wasn't enough. It was enough for the season it belonged to. That sentence settled into him like truth wrapped in grace. I won't pretend this is easy, she continued. But loving you also meant wanting you whole, and you were never whole without her. His chest tightened. You deserve someone who isn't divided, he said. Yes, she agreed quietly. I do. No anger, no resistance, just clarity. Thank you. For what? For standing beside me while I figured out how to breathe again. You would have breathed eventually, she said. I just happened to be there. I don't regret us. Neither do I. And that was enough. Take care of her, Veronica said finally. I will. And take care of yourself. I'm learning. I know you are. Goodbye, Zion. He paused, just briefly. Goodbye, Veronica. The line went still. Not broken, just finished. Zion sat there long after the call ended. Not empty, not undone, just still. The grief this time didn't tear. It settled. Like something acknowledged. Like something honored. Then released. He stood and walked back into the house. Cassandra was waiting. You okay? She asked. He nodded. I'm learning how to live without guilt. She smiled, soft, honest. I'm learning how to live without envy. And in that moment, they didn't try to rewrite anything. They simply chose each other, slowly, deliberately, honestly. That night, for the first time since everything had broken, Zion slept without nightmares. Not because the past disappeared, but because he finally allowed it to rest.